And that brings us to the quote around Black Lives Matter that really bothered me with Ben, where he says that he likes to stay out of it. Ooh, yuck. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about Love is Blind Season 8. Now, quick introduction for those of you who don't know what the show is. I'm hoping this video works for people who have seen the show and haven't seen the show. Today we are covering the first 6 episodes, which is entirely the pod section. So quick rundown for those of you who don't know. Love is Blind is basically when a bunch of people go into speed dating, but it's blind. They can't see who they're talking to on the other side of the wall. They go through a bunch of candidates. They're all competing for what they perceive to be the best candidate. If they then pair off mutually, they actually propose to one another and then kind of do like a fake test marriage. They live together for a while. And then at the end of the show, they can choose to either get married or end the relationship and go back to where they started. It's a pretty chaotic idea for a reality show. In fact, it's actually kind of absurd. It sounds like a more evil version of Married at First Sight. However, the success rate for Love is Blind is abnormally high, especially for a stupid Netflix reality show. Like, this actually works. This gets results. These people really do try and kind of like form an actual marriage. And it's strange to see because every season is basically watching people just go crazy and love bomb 2 to 10 different people. You know what I mean? Like, you're watching people in the thick of being love bombed just kind of like live together and try and make a marriage work. Like, it's actually insane. Like, the rate at which people go from complete stranger to, oh, you know, you're the missing piece. I've never felt more comfortable talking to anyone except you in my entire life. I've never known love like this after knowing them for maybe like 4 hours. It's actually crazy to watch. But what's crazier is sometimes these relationships actually turn into a successful marriage. So these first 6 episodes have dropped. It is entirely just the blind speed dating section. And I'm just going to be real. The pods are boring as fuck. I don't know if this is like a hot take. I know people in the US love Love is Blind. This is the 3rd season I've watched. I've watched the past 3. And every single time I find the pods absolutely brutal. Yes, you do get some good love triangles. And occasionally it is really interesting to watch what people say to one person to another. But most of the time you're having to watch dull, painful conversation after dull, painful conversation. Just people being like, what's your love language? What's your affirmation? What's your attachment style? Oh my God, you watch Her? I love the movie Her. Oh my God, do you listen to Joe Rogan? Like, these conversations are rough. And truthfully, I do think these 6 episodes, these 6 hours, in fact, almost 7 hours of pods, maybe could have been cut down to about 3 hours, if not less. This should have been like a long movie. You know what I mean? Like, 6 hours of pod conversations was a lot, especially with the lackluster bunch we got this season. So let's just get straight into it. I am basically going to go character by character, which will result in certain kind of pairings, ordered in the ones I had the most to say to the least I had to say. So opening up my Love is Blind review and recap for the first 6 episodes, we have Alex. Now, Alex used to be unattractive. He tells this story about how he asked a girl out and got laughed at by her and her friends. He bonds with Madison, this woman Madison, very quickly because they were both bullied when they were younger. And this forms what is essentially of the season, this big love triangle or love square. Now, Alex, how do I feel about Alex? Truthfully, at the start when he's talking to Madison, who is the only girl he is actually interested in and really dates, I thought he sucked at validation. Multiple times in this batch of episodes, Madison says that Alex is like this amazing talker. He's just so good to open up to. And like, I disagree. I thought he sucked. She would be laying out like just this heavy emotional stuff and you'd be like, man, that's crazy. Bet. Whoa. Like, he sucked. He sucked. Like, he was doing his best. I just don't think he's very like well equipped emotionally. And this kind of comes to a head later in the season. You know, there's this moment where he would rather talk about how much he loves pickles. He shows genuinely more interest in pickles than he does this insane emotional trauma she's just divulged to him. There's also an interesting moment which we will come back to because Madison talks very sexually with Mason and it goes well. But when Madison brings up sexual topics with Alex, he kind of freezes and get uncomfortable. That was an interesting character thing that jumped out to me. Madison opens up to Alex about the fact that she is anxiously attached. She will often run from things rather than stay in them when things are tough. She has a tendency to withdraw. And Alex is really confronted by this. He brings up the fact that in previous relationships, he's really struggled with people that are of the avoidant attachment style. So for a while, it looks like Madison and Alex are going to pair off, but there's a little problem. Madison is also talking to this guy called Mason. And Mason, in my opinion, seems relatively cool. If anything, I actually thought Mason and Madison made the better couple. For some reason, she kept being really hung up on Alex because he was just so good to talk to. And I didn't really feel it at all. But, you know, I wasn't in that relationship. So who am I to judge? So regardless, she also has Mason on the line. And Mason also has this woman called Meg on the line. And I'm just going to be real. I do not understand the pairings in this situation, all right? So Mason seems, again, relatively sweet, rather boyish. He's tossing up between Madison and Meg. And in my opinion, Madison is the clear pick for him, especially. Like, they seem really flirty. Madison keeps dropping these like sexual innuendos and he really seems to enjoy them. If anything, it's kind of like a deciding factor, which maybe gives Madison the ick. Maybe she was testing him in that regard. But Mason seems to talk way better with Madison. She seems way better at talking with him, way more of a mutual exchange. Whereas when Meg talks, it's the Meg show.
Let's talk about aliens for a quick sec. I don't smoke, but I have high thoughts a lot. I listened to a Joe Rogan podcast once. Ant homes are so intricate underground. There's different powers out in the universe. Once you reach a certain energy and certain power, you can actually control the weather.
I don't know if I was the only one noticing this, but it was just yada, 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 yada. And for a while, Mason was barely getting a word in. Eventually, they do start kind of mutually exchanging their weird conspiracy theories. She starts talking about the pyramids and how she believes, based off a Joe Rogan podcast, that there's something to do with like chemicals that are poured into ant piles that then control the weather or some shit. And Mason's sitting there the whole time being like, damn, that's crazy. But ends up actually seemingly liking it. Anyways, this all comes to a head because eventually Madison is torn between choosing Alex or Mason. And Mason is torn between choosing Madison or Meg. So this all comes to a head where basically Mason tells Madison that she is his like first choice essentially. And Madison says, yeah, I really need to think about that. Actually, I think Alex is my first choice. So Madison pairs off with Alex, even though I thought she should have been with Mason. And Mason attempts to pair off with Madison, but she kind of tells him, hey, actually, I chose Alex. And here's the thing. Mason then does a shitty thing. I'm going to fully acknowledge and validate Madison here that Mason then walking back what he said was a bit shitty and very transparent, right? Mason was hurt that he got rejected by Madison for Alex. So he goes, oh, actually, yeah, maybe I rushed into saying that. Maybe I didn't really mean it. And I think you picked up on that. So maybe that's why you didn't pick me. Clearly kind of trying to like take it back, walk it back a bit and not feel as exposed. And in my opinion, yes, this was a shitty thing to do, but Madison should have just gone, you know what? He's clearly feeling rejected, bit of a shitty thing, whatever. But as the conversation's unfolding and Alex and Madison are losing control over what could have been their love story, there's this point where Madison essentially says that she ended it because Mason walked back his feelings for her and what he said to her. And truthfully, like, not to play the semantics game, but he actually did this after she had already told Mason that she was going to pick Alex. You get what I mean? So it's like, yeah, it's still not ideal behavior, but at that point he'd lost. He was clearly trying to do that whole like, oh, well, I didn't even like you that much anyway, which yes, was a shitty thing of Mason to do, but I'm kind of starting to be with Alex in this conversation. I know this is kind of like the minority opinion, but if I was Alex, I would kind of be concerned as to why she is so hung up on how I feel about her ex Mason and why she's so hung up on Mason and what he's saying and how things went down if they're meant to be having this pure love story.
I also think he's completely valid, and I
he's completely valid in saying that he's committed to me and then taking it back.
You know, yes, ideally you validate your partner, and Alex fucked up a bit there. He could have gone about it differently. But truthfully, if he has heard two versions of events and she's contradicting herself, I would be concerned, like, why is she so hung up on this guy if she's choosing me? This is a bit strange. And he's obviously getting a bit antsy. Yes, I get Madison's hurt and how she wants to be validated, but essentially there's like sort of this level of emotional blackmail tied to it where the whole thing kind of falls apart. Alex rightfully recognizes this and goes, you know what? I don't think we're ready to be engaged. Look at this fight we're having, and calls the entire thing off. So after this insane love triangle, this insane love square, Alex has the BDE to just be like, no, like this is not working. Like whether it's my fault or your fault, the way this has unfolded is insane. And truthfully, yes, again, I get how Madison kind of got caught up and got a bit emotional and a bit annoyed that he wasn't instantly taking her side, but also like, yeah, Alex has heard a bunch of different things. And yes, you should always try and validate your partner, but like this is very early stages. It was just very intense very quickly. And I think he saw a style of communication and a style of fight and a style of withdrawal that I don't think he's prepared to get married to. And I know the internet kind of thinks Alex is the bad guy here, but I kind of get it. You know, even if you think Alex was in the wrong there, if he doesn't want that sort of communication style and the way they were fighting to continue, I kind of get him calling it off. All right, next we have David. Look, David is whack.
Monica, why are you here? What's wrong with you? So what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Why are you here?
What?
How old are you?
I'm 30.
Okay. So you're no longer attractive.
Oh my God.
All right, he's not the biggest red flag we've ever seen in Love is Blind. He's not nearly as bad as that one we got 2 seasons ago, that fucking dingus. I'll put him here. But he's not great. He's a medical device salesman. He admits to multiple women that he used to be an asshole to women, which on one end, I'm sort of like, oh, good on you for being self-aware. But the way he acts is sort of this thing of like, I'm going to tell you a shitty thing or I'm going to behave shitty so you think I'm self-aware, but then I can keep behaving shitty to you. Do you know what I mean? Like he consistently makes this joke of like, oh, you're over 30? Like, oh, I'm not interested at all. Ha ha ha, just kidding. It's like, no, I think there's some truth in that or you wouldn't be fucking saying it. Like what a weird thing to say. Now, one thing the internet has called him on is this whole thing of like when he meets people in the Love is Blind pods, he goes, oh, so you're here. What's wrong with you? I actually think that's just a shitty attempt at humor. Like he's also in that boat. Clearly it's self-referential. But yeah, truthfully, when someone tells you who they are, sometimes you have to believe it. I don't get bad vibes with David to the level I got with someone like Steven from last season or even Ramses. I get really nervous around people that pretend to be really nice, pretend to be really progressive, and are secretly slimy and deal with covert contracts and covert manipulation. Truthfully, yes, David is brash and abrasive, but I almost think maybe he's being this way in order to filter out people that can't handle him. And yes, like, do I think the way he behaves is good? No. Would I want my sister or my mum or any woman I know dating him? No. But there will be women that vibe with his humor, vibe with his vibe, throw it back. They enjoy fighting 2 or 3 times a week and then kiss and make up. Like, I think he will inevitably find someone who is compatible with him through that method. Now, whether you think that's fucked up or not, like, sure, you know what I mean? The shit he's saying is totally whack, but I think truthfully, at the very least, Lauren has a very good idea of who he is, or so it seems, because the issue is David's a fucking bullshit artist. You know, David will tell one girl like, oh, you're the only girl for me, and then tell another girl, oh, you're the only girl for me, I'm going to break up with that one, and then lie to that one. And like, this guy was spinning webs. That was my thing. I gave him some benefit of the doubt at the start. You know, I was like, maybe this is his weird humor. Maybe he's just trying to find someone who's compatible with his shitty values. But like, no, you watch him throughout this season and he lies and manipulates. And I don't know how he feels comfortable forming a relationship with Lauren. So yeah, he's with Lauren now, right? There's this whole situation where there's a love triangle between Lauren and Molly, where he tells Molly that he's going to choose her and then actually changes his mind. And then Molly kind of sniffs this out and goes, you want to be with Lauren, just go be with Lauren. And then when he gets with Lauren, he lies to Lauren and says, no, you were always my first choice. I definitely didn't ever tell anyone else that you were my first choice. And this shit's cooked. And if I was David, I would be worried that this is going to come back to me. You have to know at this point that everyone meets up eventually. Everyone's going to talk eventually. And on top of that, let's say you actually have a successful marriage with Lauren. All right. Eventually, she's going to see this fucking show and see how full of shit you are. So, yeah, I think it's not looking good for David. I think they will have fights. They will probably be the problematic couple of this season. But I don't think David is the biggest ever walking red flag that we usually get in these seasons. He's not great, and I'm sure he will manage to surprise me, but so far, he's just kind of your average shitty bloke. You know what I mean? Next, we're going to talk about Madison. Now, I mentioned her before because she was in that whole love triangle, love square that actually resulted in no successful relationships. But there are just a few things I want to talk about with Madison. So she opens up to Alex about her sense of stigma around sex and sexual relationships due to her religious upbringing. And I just felt like Alex handled this really poorly. He had no clue what to say, no kind of real good attempt at emotional validation. And I found it interesting because then she feels like she needs to reassure him and kind of like soothe his emotions afterwards. You see multiple times that she's trying to smooth that over. Whenever she opens up to Alex, she then kind of like fills the awkward space when really he should have been trying to do that. And yeah, she was really down bad for Alex and really craved his validation when Mason, in my opinion, was better at validating her emotions. And I guess he was, because you see how their kind of relationship fell apart at the end of the 6 episodes, where the big issue was Alex not being able to validate her, not being able to hold her emotions. And yes, whether you want to debate whether her display of emotions was healthy or even fair is up to you. But it is interesting that I was kind of noticing this lack of engagement with her emotions, and that is ultimately what killed them. Yeah, Meg, I mentioned her before. I thought she was like trying way too hard to be quirky. This is the one that talked about the Joe Rogan stuff that was kind of into Mason. She talked about Joe Rogan and Piles, said Her was her favorite movie. There is this moment where like she just gave Pick Me vibes as well. You know, there's this point where she's like, all I want is like a relationship where I can build a fort and order Chinese food and then have sex on the floor. It's sort of like, yeah, okay, I'm sure you're going to struggle to find a guy that would want to do that. Like, come on. There's also this interesting moment where she calls Mason daddy and he's like, ooh, I like that. And then she's like, ooh, daddy, I don't like it. Gross. And then proceeds to be like, but you can call me baby girl. I'm like, they're kind of linked. Like, come on. All right, so Daniel and Taylor. So Daniel is a short king. He is nervous that a woman will not like his height, but he's looking for the right girl. That's really his big thing. He pairs off with Taylor. They have a really good connection, good chemistry, good vibe. They seem really sweet. He proposes to her. They are hitched. They are together. And then Lauren gets back and she's like, I reckon I know this motherfucker. Something's off. I reckon I've seen a photo of this guy in front of a Christmas place on Instagram. And this is a big deal because earlier in the season, Daniel talked about the fact that he takes a bunch of Christmas photos. So this checks out. Now she's concerned because she goes, what happens if he's just telling me what I want to hear because he stalked my Instagram and figured out what I like, what I dislike? And also, is he cheating the experiment because he knows what I look like and is just pursuing me for my looks? That's what I was trying to avoid. Now, truthfully, I have some questions, right? Because if he just happened to have followed her before this whole reality show and it's just circumstance that now they're on the show together, I actually don't think he would have figured out who she was across the other side. I don't think they have access to their phones. It's not like he went back to his phone, searched up her name and went, oh my God, that's that girl I followed ages ago. So what it would require is he followed a random girl in his life who happened to be Taylor. Right? And then has a good enough memory that then when he starts talking to a Taylor, he has figured out that it's her and remembers all this stuff from lurking her Instagram. I just don't know how likely that is. I can completely buy that they follow each other. I think Taylor is right. I'm just not sure whether this was part of some intentional master plan, because how could you have possibly known that this random person you followed was also going to be in this reality show you were going on? Unless the cast list leaked early or something. Regardless, I do think he's bullshitty a bit. I think there is a chance he did actually recognize her when they walked out, or maybe as they were talking, he went, oh, is that girl I followed on Instagram? I just don't know how much stock he would have put in, unveiling her Instagram and putting it in the memory bank for later. But regardless, he does give me a weird vibe when she goes, oh, do you have photos in front of like a fireplace, like a Christmas photo with your legs crossed, holding an alcoholic beverage? And he goes, nah, non-alcoholic, but no, I don't have a photo of that. And it's like, dude, you are bullshitting. You do have a photo in front of a fireplace with your legs crossed. You're just holding a kitty cat. Can you really blame her for forgetting that? So yeah, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know how both of them, or at least Taylor, remembers his Instagram so well, especially if the interaction was her just denying his follow request. But regardless, she remembers it, and I think she's on the money. And I think Daniel's being a bit of a bullshitter. But regardless, I don't know how much that negates. If this was coincidence and circumstance, I mean, it's just unfortunate, but it is what it is. They seem to get along. They seem to love each other. But if he did somehow pull off this master plan, that's pretty fucking, first off, impressive, but really fucked up. Next, we have Joey and Monica. They get engaged to each other legit after like 12 hours. I reckon they're going like, what, 2 dates? This was like an insane, like an all-time run. Just insane hustle. But you know what? They're kind of goofballs together. They're really cute. They match each other's frequency. Like they seem cute. They seem cute. Who am I to judge? Like they're two little goofballs. And you know what? There's kind of two types of couples in Love is Blind, I've noticed. There's ones like Monica and Joey, where by some miracle, two very compatible people have actually found each other in Love is Blind. Like they're fucking cute together. Same with, actually, funnily enough, Daniel and Taylor. You know, I actually think Daniel and Taylor are quite cute together despite this whole photo issue. But then there are other couples, like the one we're about to get to, which is Ben and Sara, who I think are just kind of together because they didn't want to be left alone. You know what I mean? It's kind of like if Mason and Meg got together just because, like, well, it's better than being alone. Let's just give it a shot. Ben and Sara, bruh, I don't even think Sara liked Ben for most of it. And you know what? Rightfully fucking so, because one of their first conversations between Ben and Sara was she's like, yo, tell me about your politics. And he says that he didn't vote in the last election. He doesn't think it matters. Why would I vote when my vote doesn't matter? I'm sorry. I would actually rather come across someone in the pods myself that is completely on the polar opposite end of me politically than meet someone like that. I don't know if this is a hot take. I don't even mind if you don't vote, but you have strong opinions and that's why you didn't vote. But it was the 1-2 punch of I didn't vote and then like just like no fucking basis for that decision. I just don't think my vote matters. Like this dude is not well educated. And you know what? Not everyone needs to be super political. But I don't know. I don't find it particularly admirable to be like, oh, it's not really relevant to me. Like it is entirely relevant to you. Like, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? I work with people in the disability sector, and there's always people being like, oh, I hate when politics comes into the disability sector. And it's like, but who you vote for decides what stuff gets passed in regards to disability. You know what I mean? It's like this stuff is inherently linked. And yeah, I get it. All right. If he's like, oh, sometimes I just want to relax and I don't want to talk about politics all the time, that's one thing. You know what I mean? If he's like, oh, I try not to be too politically inclined, but I voted this way because of X, Y, Z, fine. But to act like politics doesn't affect you and your vote doesn't matter, it's cooked. So I didn't like Ben. Needless to say, I did not like Ben. Then she brings up Black Lives Matter, and they're in Minneapolis. And he's like, yeah. She brings up George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, and he kind of goes like, yeah, I don't know. I just haven't really done any research into it. It's like, how much research did you need to do into the George Floyd thing, man? Like, really? Like, really? First off, like, it was unavoidable, even here in Australia. But secondly, it's like, what did you miss? What did you miss? And Sara, who is clearly coming off incredibly political, incredibly interested in politics, decides to look over this and just go, yeah, you know what? I reckon we'll date anyway. Like, bit weird, but whatever. And the last thing is Ben is very religious. So Sara opens up to Ben being like, you know what? I struggle with religion because I want to believe, but also my sister is gay and a lot of people in my family were very homophobic towards her. She then asked Ben if he would go to Pride weekend, and he gives the most BS yes I've ever heard. He's like, yeah, for sure. I'd love to go to Pride weekend. It's like, do any of us buy that? And that brings us to the quote around Black Lives Matter that really bothered me with Ben, where he says that he likes to stay out of it. Ooh, yuck. And it's not like his version of staying out of it like wasn't posting a black square or posting like an infographic. Like to act like, oh, I'm not even gonna like think about this stuff. I wish to stay out of it. I'm like, why? You devote all this energy to religion and being a good person and like loving thy neighbor, and you're not even going to like look into issues that are literally happening in your city, in your surroundings. Like, really? Regardless, Ben proposes to Sara and she says yes. And as I said before, I think this is just a marriage where they're like, well, I'd rather leave here engaged than alone like a loser, so they get together. Anyway, circling back to Joey and Monica, because I didn't really talk about them. So Joey has massive golden retriever energy. He says this himself. Initially, I found this cringe, but then as I watched him, he never really had a massive red flag moment. I actually think he's really cute. I was worried we were going to get a Steven, like some toxic fucking weirdo. But no, I actually like Joey. And you know who else I like? I like Monica. Now, Monica, she has rough banter, right? She does the whole like, I like all music except country. And then they proceed to have bad banter with each other about country music. So again, they're kind of matching each other's frequency here. And yeah, they get engaged. She tells this story about how her ex went on spring break and then dumped her. So clearly like the ex cheated, right? Anyways, they get together. They're really happy together. Good on them. I'm happy. Right, next we have this love triangle between this guy that calls himself, like unironically calls himself D-Buckets. His name is Devin, but I'm going to call him D-Buck. And this love triangle is between D-Buck, Virginia, and Brittany. And you know what? Virginia and Brittany are both awesome, awesome women. They were my favorite women in this entire show. I thought they were smart. I thought they were both funny. I thought they were both well-spoken. Both very different vibes and energies. And Devin, D-Buckets, had the pick of both of them. All right, somehow. And I don't want to be too mean to D-Buckets, but I did not find this guy particularly captivating at all. Yes, he has a very tough story about self-deletion, ideation, and also drug addiction. And both women hold a lot of space for him. You know, they really sit there with him and carry this for him and let him really open up. And on one end, I really admire him opening up this much. On the other hand, I do worry that maybe he can be a bit self-involved at times. And the reason I say this is because he opens up to Brittany multiple times about everything he's been through. She briefly opens up about the fact that she's bisexual, which isn't even this massive, heavy thing or anything. And he hears this and instantly picks Virginia instead of Brittany. And that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. You know, and he says that this wasn't why, but you know what I mean? Like, to me, it seemed like he very clearly got weirded out by that. So one of the main reasons that D-Buckets, the basketball-obsessed madman, picks Virginia is because she is also interested in basketball. And I'm sorry, like, this guy kind of gave me weird vibes, all right? I particularly don't subscribe to the idea in dating that you need to have things in common, like tons of things in common with your partner. Obviously, stuff like politics, how you treat women or men, or how you look on race or the world or religion or politics, all of that stuff is really, really important. But when it comes to hobbies, I think that's some of the most selfish, self-involved stuff you can care about. I'm a massive movie fan. I'm a massive TV show fan. One of my priorities in dating would never be to find someone who also really loves movies and can talk about movies the way I do. I think that's kind of like weird as fuck. You know what I mean? Like, I would not care less. Are they a nice person? Do we line up on morals and ethics and values? Can I at least talk to them about a movie I've seen? If so, cool. But do I expect them to sit there and watch fucking The Brutalist for 3.5 hours? Absolutely fucking not. And I find the fact that Devin really picked Virginia because she somewhat feigns interest in basketball a bit more than Brittany, who held way more space for him emotionally, really vapid. You know, like, truthfully, yeah, I get it. Like, you want to bond over shared interests. But, like, I don't know. I find it weird when people are like, oh, I need someone who's into like, basically want to date themselves so they can just, you know, mansplain basketball all day. And and the reason I say all this is because I feel bad for Brittany. You know, she really was there for him emotionally, really like cried with him, really went through a bunch of emotions with him just to be rejected because she was bisexual. And then he sits there with googly eyes for Virginia being like, oh my God, you used to cheerlead for basketball games and I used to coach children's basketball teams. It's like a match made in heaven. Wow, 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 wow. And yes, nothing wrong with Virginia. I don't think she's been a pick-me. I don't think she's been particularly bad. She's lovely as well. Like, she's a great choice. I just found Devin D-Bucket's decision-making incredibly shallow and vapid. You know what I mean? I have hobbies. I have interests. All right. Like, I just would not ever use those as a defining choice making moment. Like, if I was in Devon's shoes, I just cannot picture discarding someone who really held my emotions, was as there for me as Brittany was, and crushed it emotionally, and discard her for someone who likes the same YouTube channels I like or something. You know what I mean? I think it's kind of cooked. And that's just like something I always find. Like, I find it really weird when people in dating are like, I need someone to be into the same things I do. I'm like, why? Like, isn't it a great opportunity when you're in a relationship with a partner to kind of have them be another side? You know what I mean? Like, oh, tell me about these things I don't do. Tell me about your work career that isn't in line with mine. Typically, I find the most unhappy couples I know in my personal life are people that like are both accountants or are both influencers, because they're just fucking like always on with each other. And it's like weird. There's no switching off. Regardless, these are all the people in Love is Blind season 6. My bread and butter, truthfully, is when they move in together. That's when we get the good drama, the good stuff to really unpack. These pods are a bit silly, all right? They're a means to an end, and this chunk went on way too long, in my opinion. But once they move in together, that's my shit. You know, I can sit here and overanalyze social interactions till the cows come home. And if you enjoy that, I thoroughly suggest you check out my Married at First Sight Australia reviews and recaps. I've been covering every episode of that season of TV in depth. So even if you haven't seen the show, you can watch them. They're all on my channel. MAF Season 12 is the playlist, and I'm currently doing that. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, liking, and commenting. Also, consider getting a membership to this channel. It massively helps out the channel, keeps me going. You get access to a podcast I do every 2 to 4 weeks, covering every single thing I've watched, both movies and TV shows. I will also be covering every episode of White Lotus Season 3 for members only, as well as a bunch of other content that is member requested. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely day.